The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. Part 1. Men Without Chests. The Green Book by Gaius and Titus is a philosophical work that poses as a grammar book. Instead of highlighting what makes literature noteworthy, the Green Book teaches students to make assumptions about statements and how they reflect the emotions of the author. This sharply contrasts the Tao, which teaches pupils traditional morality and values. The head, the center of intelligence, rules the stomach, the center of desire, through the chest, the center of will and organized emotions. The philosophical influence of Gaius and Titus remove a man's sentiments placed by the Tao, thus producing men without chests. Part 2. The Way. In trying to debunk traditional values, innovators will base their ideas off new values or ideologies that actually have their root in traditional morality. These traditional values transcend time, causing innovators to acknowledge that the traditional values are, in fact, the root of their new values. The innovator will recognize the nature of morality and have to decipher if he will reject or accept the traditional morality. If morality is human, it may be rejected by many because humanity is nature, and nature is not something to be ruled by, rather meant to rule. Part 3. The Abolition of Man.
Part 3 of C.S. Lewis's lecture, The Abolition of Man, focuses on men's alleged conquest of nature and the danger of dehumanizing values and morals. Lewis asks the question, in what sense is man the possessor of increasing power over nature? Some would argue that technology has given man an edge over nature, but, as Lewis presents, in peacetime, anyone who can afford a good can buy it. On the other hand, these goods can, quote, be withheld from some men by other men by those who sell, or those who will allow the sale, end quote, page 54. Power is possessed by some men to lord over others, not over nature. Lewis uses the example of contraceptives. The current generation, through the use of contraceptives, wields the ultimate power over the next, determining when and if they will live. Lewis breaks the human race into generations from emergence to extinction. The generation who breaks free of the power of its predecessors and from the stranglehold of tradition then exercise its power over its successors and predecessors. In that ultimate generation, the masters of the human species will still only be a minority of that generation. According to Lewis on page 58, this means that, quote, there neither is nor can be any simple increase of power on man's side. Each new power won by man is a power over man as well. Each advance leaves him weaker as well as stronger. In every victory, besides being the general who triumphs, he is also the prisoner who follows the triumphal car. End quote.
The final stage, or the moment of man's so-called ultimate power, is when man has attained perfect control over himself, over human nature. The leaders, the conditioners, of the new age will be able to mold society and its values in any way they please. This may present difficulties. In the traditional system, teachers handed on the Tao, a norm they were given and operated within, believed and upheld. In this new system, the conditioners have been freed from the Tao and other human and moral restraints, but now must develop human actions and reactions to situations. Conditioners will now create conscience, but what will govern these conditioners? The old system of values, the Tao, tells them that they have a duty to do what is good for the human race. But this generation, the leaders, have conquered old ways and how they have governed humans. If by conquering the Tao they achieve their total power, why reinstill the same morals and perhaps fall under nature's power yet again? Lewis then addresses those who argue that the conditioners will not be bad men and can choose the correct conscience of humanity. But, as he presents on page 63, quote, good and bad applied to them are words without content, for it is from the conditioners that the content of these words is henceforth to be derived, end quote. Good and bad no longer have meaning in the new system because the conditioners now determine what actions and mindsets are bad or good. Lewis moves on to the idea of governing by likes and dislikes, but this is fundamentally flawed. Every person has different likes and dislikes, and the conditioners have no argument to force men to do things they dislike. Why should they? But without the Tao, or duty, the conditioners are unable to prove the validity of self-sacrifice, and if they use duty to explain why, they have slipped under nature's power yet again, and the conquest is incomplete. The conditioners must step outside of morality, or the Tao, into a nameless and undetermined void. They lose their humanity. And, on page 64, Lewis relates his argument to his labeling of the third part of his lecture, quote, Man's final conquest has proved to be the abolition of man, end quote. Outside of emotions lies impulse, the basic desire of wanting and acting in accordance with one's wants. The conditioners will act on their pleasures, which some argue could still lead to good decisions that benefit the entire race. Lewis doubts this. Strip a man of his thoughts of societal norms and values, and those good impulses that seemed so strong before have decreased in influence.
The happiness of mankind is left to the chance that the conditioners will be governed by benevolent impulses. But impulse is basic human nature. So, a select group of men, the conditioners, govern the human race, but are in turn governed by basic human nature. In the final stage, in the climax of the revolt by the human race, man's conquest of nature has led to the conquest of man by nature. Lewis moves on to clarify his argument by presenting the definition of nature. To men, nature is quantified. Man's analytical approach to nature has stripped nature of its quality and its immense abstract reality. This places man's conquest of nature in a new light, as stated on page 71. We reduce things to mere nature in order that we may conquer them. We are always conquering nature, because nature is the name for what we have, to some extent, conquered. The stars do not become nature till we can weigh and measure them. The soul doesn't become nature till we can psychoanalyze her. Any victories gained over nature through this approach are lost in that final stage, when the human race is conquered completely by nature. Man even approaches himself scientifically, claiming his judgments are open to scientific manipulation. But this acceptance of manipulation is deadly in that final stage, where nature, through the conditioners, will take complete control. Lewis now outlines two paths for humanity on page 73. Either we are rational spirit obliged forever to obey the absolute values of the Tao, or else we are mere nature to be kneaded and cut into new shapes for the pleasures of masters who must, by hypothesis, have no motive but their own natural impulses. The Tao rules over even the highest leaders and protects man from tyranny over other men. Currently, traditional values are being abandoned and new ideologies are being pushed by men onto men. To participate in the Tao is to be human, for it is interwoven within it with human will and reason. Lewis uses the example of a tree whose branches grow and expand to answer new situations and moral questions. This guidance allows man to control his actions and explain why he will or will not do something. However, when we step outside of the Tao, mankind steps into that void, and man becomes absolutely nothing but that manipulative material for the conditioners.
So what does this all mean? Is Lewis bashing science and saying that technology and new developments will only lead us closer to this final deadly stage? Not exactly, as we see in his next argument. Lewis lectures on science and magic and highlights the similarity on page 77. Quote, "For magic and applied science alike, the problem is how to subdue reality to the wishes of men. The solution is a technique, and both, in the practice of this technique, are rendering to do things hitherto regarded as disgusting." End quote. The goal of modern science is to give man ultimate power over all, instead of focusing on the truth and real knowledge. Lewis proposes a new natural philosophy, a change in the way man studies and regards nature. The abstraction that is nature would be treated as such, and objects would no longer be quantified and stripped of their beauty. The instinct of man to pull apart an animal or haphazardly pollute the environment would be controlled by this new philosophy. In essence, Lewis states that mankind could conquer nature without being conquered themselves by nature through the conditioners. With the modern analytical approach by scientists, Lewis fears human reason will soon be killed off along with any respect for nature. We cannot explain away every step we take along the biological and natural pathway, for one reaches a point where explanation is impossible. A point must come where everything is concrete, explanations are given, and principles are no longer transparent and wavering. Lewis warns humanity of the danger of this shaky philosophy on the final page of his lecture. Quote, "A wholly transparent world is an invisible world. To see through all things is the same as not to see." End quote.